right, sweet. There we go. Okay, well, Glassdoor.com, for whatever reason, has decided it doesn't want to load, but you sort of see what I'm getting at, right? Good news. Lots and lots of data in it. So you got a very... Oh. Okay, well, let's see if we can get this to work. And we're back. Okay, so let's try that again. So that gets you to Microsoft. All right. So you can see, right, that these posts are sort of a small view of what you might look at. So this is, for example, someone who went through a software development engineer who talks about their experiences. Generally, when you click on these, though, you can load larger pages. So you also see there's a ranking system, so comp and benefits, 5 stars, work-life balance 2, senior management 4, culture and values, and career opportunities. So let's see if we can load this up, because it's a little more detailed than this. So here we go. So this loads our review page. So he has his pros, what he doesn't like. This is another person who has very good culture. Things are a little different. Software developer, engineering test. You can see, right, there's all this data that for you doing a job search is really, really valuable when you consider a company you may or may not be interested in working at. Okay, let's go here. You can also look at locations too. So let's try see. So we can see Seattle pops up. Let's see if we can look at Kent. Yeah, there we go. Let's go search. So what this does is it gives us all, so this actually did not give us, well, this is one of the problems with Glassdoor that I was going to get to later, but I'll talk about now. Sometimes this part of the user interface does not work so well. You can see, even though I'm looking at Kent, I'm getting routed through Seattle, which is kind of unfortunate, but sometimes, it's just the private sector is not always as efficient as they make it out to be. But you can kind of see, right, that I have all this sort of information, reviews, lots and lots of data on sort of what employees do. The good news is that this data is here, and the user interface is relatively easy to navigate. You're just going to look through. You can search for employee. You can also you can search for a company. You can search by location. If we go back to the front, you can also look at salaries and interviews. You can look at all this stuff. The bad news is you don't have access to all of it because it requires a paid account to see all of the content. So you're going to get kind of a snapshot of the information you actually want. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it is kind of a limitation of what Glassdoor does. It's also an example of really the nature of proprietary information. And when they say knowledge is power, it's not just a cliche, it's actually true. Companies recognize that the data they collect has value, especially this kind of data. And the chances are, if you want to get unfettered access to it, you're going to have to pay. It's just the reality of it. But you can, as we've seen here, get a reasonably good look at sort of jobs and other positions available here. Let's see if we can find one more sort of job, and then I'll move on to the next one. So let's look at job title. So let's go salesperson. There we go. That's a preferred term, and we'll just look at Seattle. So we can start to see inside sales, 2 reviews, 3 reviews. You can also look at company ratings. You can also sort this by job type. So you can look at everything from full-time, part-time, contract, internship, temporary, apprentice. So this is also something worth considering. The bad news is this distance tab is just not very good. So if I go within 5 miles, it's not really kind of routing me to what I want it to do. Like, we're talking an energetic and outgoing retail associate for several locations in Western Washington, so Olympia and Bellingham. This just doesn't help. It's one of the big problems with Glassdoor is they're just sort of location for feature. If you're looking for locations inside of a specific city, so for example, if you have certain kind of constraints relative to your ability to get around, or if you have a car, this is not going to do you a lot of good. But the good news is I'm going to show you what will work pretty well. Google Maps. Google Maps is a surprisingly powerful tool in the job search, because what it will do is it'll give you very, very precise data on sort of anyone in this area. The bad news is it won't tell you, if they're hiring, but if you want to look up at a business that you might want to try to cold call or see if they have jobs, that's not a bad idea. So let's say I wanted to work at Lowe's, and I'm looking for just like not even Lowe's specifically, but I'm looking for some kind of temporary summer work, and I want it to be close to campus because let's say, for example, you live like over here. So when I scroll in, I can see that these hits start to come up. That Google has identified sort of these sort of stores as places that might be interesting, or as large and important outlets. So there's like retail, Goodwill, Dollar Tree, and Lowe's. So if I go through Lowe's and I go through their website, I'm rerouted here. And from here, I can start looking at, any kind of relevant employment offers they might have at this place I want to work. So if we look at, let's see here, you got your career tab. So if I click on this, that'll route me to a page where Lowe's will post like sort of their employment, opportunities for employment. And from there, I need to check kind of the store and make sure it matches up, but you can kind of see the idea here. So the downside of Google Maps is you're only going to be able to search. You can like search for fields. For example, you can look for like accounting or accountant. So these are all like accounting firms. But if you're getting a job as an accountant, you know that, accountant firms aren't the only places that hire these people that, would be hiring. Like lots and lots of different companies hire accountants. So just because like you can't find something on here that works, doesn't necessarily mean there's nothing to be had. But the good news is if you are, dealing with kind of like a childcare necessity or a school commitment, or you really need to work in a certain like geographic location, this is the best service bar none when it comes to identifying potential employers. Because Google Maps, and at least in terms of its the data it has gathered, is second to none when it comes to finding sort of firms. And because Google's rankings are so important, everyone with even kind of that is like marginally above like a food truck stand will be have a business posted to here. Like any business you look on in the greater Seattle area will be on here, almost certainly. Okay, so this is Google Maps. You can't find a job, but it's very useful for pinpointing something. You can also do it in Hoovers actually too. So if we go, so Google Maps is a little more precise than Hoovers, but Hoovers still works. So if we go databases, Hoovers online, I click continue. So Hoovers allows you to do it through like kind of company searching here, but you can also build lists. And you can build lists by location. So for example, I want to find records matching every criteria. I want to select one. We'll go with add locations. And I just want to search by area code. So for example, like, let's try this one. By city, Seattle. Yeah, unfortunately this area code's not taking, but let's try city. Washington. Locations added. So you can see company locations. And you want to just find, and this is like a sweeping search, you're just looking to find everything you can. So I have 7,990 companies, view results. Pull it up. So this is everybody that's registered at Kent. So I have everything from school districts to Petrocard to Carlisle Holdings. And from here, you need to filter it down based on what you're interested in. So usually what you do is by industry type. You can look at location type, but generally the two most useful tabs will be industry, because all these are centered in Kent, Washington. Now, it doesn't tell you if any of these companies are hiring, but it's not a bad place to look if you're just looking for businesses in the Kent municipality. And if you have in mind like a particular industry you want to work in, for example, like if I go to industry here, I can filter it down to business sector, wholesale, consulting, and I'm going to start narrowing my results down fast. So let's go customer service and professional service. And now see I'm down to 300 searches, or sorry, like 349 different companies. So all these are companies that Ken has tagged as being involved in one of these two sort of filters, and you can use these filters to get very precise information about companies in a targeted geographic area. The bad news is they're not going to tell you if they're hiring, so you're going to have to do a lot of legwork to sort of figure out whether or not, even if like they are hiring employees at the time. So anyway, that's Hoovers. Google Maps is the user interface is not necessarily better, in all honesty, it's just different. This is more likely to tell you something that, if for example you want to get a job as an accountant, is a little more useful because it's going to include any business that is anything tangentially related to accounting, where Google really requires you to use that preferred search term to get the desired result. All right, close that up. The next thing we're going to look at is some of the NACE data. So what NACE does is it's an association of colleges and employers. Interesting. Okay, so that is the wrong link. You'll have to excuse me. Okay, so let's look for NACE. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, here we go. Well, like I said, there's a reason why this is not a LibGuide yet. So here we are at NACE. National Association of Colleges and Employers. So NACE has all kinds of fun data on what kind of sort of wages and what are the sort of benchmarks we can look at when it comes to job outlooks. So this is our first destination survey report starting salaries class of 2014. We don't know yet if they have. So the thing about NACE that's kind of the drawback as far as a search tool, right, is it's a lot of their information is proprietary. So you may or may not have access to it. So let's see here if we can get into this. Yep, so this is proprietary. It'll give you some highlights, but they're not going to tell you, unfortunately, what you're looking at specifically, which is kind of irksome sometimes. I mean, it's a great resource, but it is a proprietary database. So we can see this is not so relevant. Job Outlook surveys is also proprietary. There's just a lot of kind of proprietary content here. But, you know, sometimes they do have stuff that is more sort of available. Or what you can also do if you really want to find something, is sometimes you can get around these proprietary restrictions by Googling it. So NACE reports on employers. Aha, so here we go. Okay, well, so normally this page loads, but sometimes the internet just doesn't like me. So here we go. Job Outlook. So NACE has probably the clunkiest sort of user interface we've looked at so far, but it's got some really, really useful information that you know is relevant to you during the job search. So this is attributes employers seek on a candidate's resume, ranked according to percentage of respondents. So 77% indicated leadership, and from there on down. So as you can see, leadership scores highly, so does written communication skills, teamwork, ethic, analytical, technical, and then it sort of starts ranking down here. So nobody really cares about tactfulness, entrepreneurial skills, friendly, outgoing personality, and unfortunately creativity scores rock bottom, which kind of makes me sad, but it's just sometimes the reality is it's a hard call. Like the world is a little bit hard and cruel at times. The influence of attributes is also worth looking at because you can see some of these change over time. So these are scored right on an index of 1 to 5 where it has no influence and extremely influential. So this is relevant, right, if you're thinking about what kind of information you want to put on a resume. So for example, you know, the highest scoring attribute according to NACE's 2014 survey was this leadership position. So it scored like 3.9 and 3.9 among these recruiters. Major scores very high. High GPA scores pretty high. So if you were like, you know, an honors candidate or had like a GPA of like 3.8 or 3.9, maybe it's worth noting on your resume. Extracurricular clubs are important, but as you can see, it actually declined. School attended is relevant, but only is somewhat of an influence. And then like, you know, foreign language acquisition or study abroad score right around the bottom, which, you know, as someone who takes pride in the fact they can speak fluent Spanish is, you know, disheartening a little bit, but at the end of the day, you're only looking at the data. It doesn't necessarily make it good or bad. You just want to kind of know what sort of information people are interested in. So while I would personally say that knowing a foreign language and studying abroad are both like relevant things to do, especially like volunteer work, you just got to look at this and go, well, okay. So, even though, like, for example, you might know, like, no Spanish or French or Russian, if I'm looking at these aggregates and I'm applying to generic, like, 100 different companies, that's like something you could put on the resume, but unfortunately it's probably not something you're going to want to highlight. That being said, like, if the position itself calls for language competency, or you can argue during the interview with it, a foreign language is an advantage, which FYI, it usually is. One cool thing about Central Washington University and the neighborhood that you live in is the neighborhoods around like Kent and Tukwila and Auburn are actually very, very diverse. Tukwila actually has like a higher rate of like language diversity and more sort of different language there than the greater Seattle area, which is kind of incredible. So you'll have to indulge a little bit of a random tangent here, but when I first got here in Seattle, I was doing some volunteer work for the Red Cross before I could actually find like a paid position. So one of the things I got to do was I got to go down to Tukwila and do an interpretation session at the like school board meeting they had with a bunch of like parents. So I, for example, can speak English and Spanish, so I was working there as an English-Spanish interpreter, and it was really, really cool. Like I got to meet, like there were like Nepalese interpreters, Somali, French. Like that was a team of almost like 50 or 60 of us, and it was a great experience. So yeah, shameless foreign language plug. Finished. We're gonna get back to looking at NACE. So as we can see, this is useful data. The problem is it's hard to find stuff on here that's not proprietary. But see this, in this case, we found it. It's not proprietary. But the problem is they don't tell you what is and what isn't. And it's kind of a, searching through NACE can be a little bit of a frustrating experience. But the good news is what you do find is often sort of valuable, or it can be very valuable to what you're looking at. So this, hopefully, is proprietary. Let's see here. Post-recession employment for young college graduates. So yeah, the reality is, as you can see, there's a lot of potentially good data on this, but you just can't get to all of it. Anyway, so yeah, that's NACE. It's not bad. It's almost easier to go about searching this thing through the Google search technique. So what Google does, right, is it really is interested in pages that have lots of links to them and views. So if I look at NACE, employers want, and I start scrolling through these articles, so you can see, right, because these appear high on Google's list, it means there's a lot of pages that are linking to them. So if a page has a lot of links, that means it's not proprietary. So it's almost worth your time to sort of sift through NACE data, not by going through their website, but by doing it sort of like this. So I have Forbes, 10 skills, and all these kinds of things are worth looking at because it gets you an idea of, okay, what is an aggregate do employers want? And how can I factor that in when I'm building my resume? Just remember that this only gives you averages. Averages are, exactly that. They reflect a broad swath of personalities, a broad swath of employers. And remember, you're not applying to everybody. You're applying to specific companies where you want to work at. So it's a resource that I want to direct your attention to because I think it can be valuable. But I would kind of put it near the bottom of places, honestly, I would check. Like, I would go through Hoover's and Reddit first before I ever went to NACE. But, one of your jobs as an information professional is not to, I just want to make sure that you have all the tools that you need. And now, for the last, couple minutes, we're going to talk about Craigslist. It's, that time has come. So, Craigslist is, in some ways, the black hole of the internet. It is a wholly anonymous board where you can post employment information. So, if we're being honest, I have used Craigslist to find offers and to do research on companies, especially if I was looking through if I kind of know what to look for. So the advantage that I wanted to sort of direct you to is it has a classified jobs board that is at least city specific, which is helpful, and it has these tabs. So the interface is good. And it also has a map widget that allows you to sort of filter through sort of information. So again, it's a tool that people use. I'm aware that people use this because I have done this before. So again, I have found a couple jobs through Craigslist, as doing paralegal work, and I personally had pretty good experiences, but I want to take this last minute to talk to you a little bit about how to protect yourself while you're using Craigslist. So this is our education I can look through this. His contract is internship. I also have the option to look at this through a map setting. So this is pretty useful if you're looking to work in a specific municipality, and I can break this down. So if I scroll down, let's say for example I want to work up around Delridge. I can see there's a summer day camp position here. There is Jewish educators, more Jewish educators, which could be interesting. With these two tabs, you have to click in and it pops up some Montessori directorates and instructors for Summer Academy in West Seattle. So the bad news is Craigslist has the most spam and is probably the trickiest thing to use, I would say, properly. So I've made some helpful little do's and don'ts. Craigslist, create a dummy email account for all of your resume submissions. Sometimes you apply to a legitimate looks like a legitimate employment opportunity on Craigslist, and it turns out that they're just fishing for personal information. If you give them your primary email account, you have to block them, and they will, create a nuisance for themselves. So if you're applying for Craigslist, make a dummy email account. That way, if you get spammed all the time, it's no sweat. It's all for Craigslist and Craigslist only. Pay attention to the job post. So to deal with all this spam, a lot of legitimate jobs, in fact, actually, this is one of the signs that you are looking at a legitimate position, is they're going to require you to submit specific phrases in the subject line. So what this is, it reflects sort of filtering software. Craigslist, once an email goes up, bots can pick it up and spam kind of an email account pretty relentlessly. So what a lot of companies will do is they want you to enter, they'll write in the subject line, if you don't, let's say we're working as a paralegal, they'll say paralegal company name. If you don't enter that in, we're not even going to look at your resume because we're just going to filter it into the trash can. So yeah, read this, pay attention to the job post. If it says put these words in the subject line, put them in the subject line. Edit your address out of your resume. Legitimate employers will be happy to communicate with you over email or over phone and set up a meeting in either a public place, coffee shop is really, really common, I've done this a couple times too, or their office. So, this is just how kind of Craigslist, as an information environment, conducts itself. No employer will ever criticize you for not putting your address on Craigslist because, if they are, not spammers themselves or not hopelessly naive, they understand that, this is not a forum where you want to go around giving out a lot of personal information. So if they are legitimate employers who have any kind of familiarity with this tool at all, they'll be more than happy to communicate with you over email or by phone. And they will also never, ever, ever, ever ask you to meet anywhere that's not an office or a very public place. So which leads us to our don't. Never, ever meet anywhere that's not an office or a public place. Just don't do it. If it seems so if it's not an office, it's not a public place, and they're really pushy, chances are you've wandered into, as I'm going to reference it, the knife sales problem. You're running into some kind of high-pressure scale scheme or worse. So if it seems like it's a great offer, but they want you to meet at his house, just be nope, next that, and move right on. Don't ever, ever give out your social security number, banking information, or any financial information of any kind to a prospective employer over email. Sometimes employers, with legitimate reasons, will run credit checks, but they will never, ever do this over email. This is always something they will do during the interview process. So when you're going in for the interview, if a credit check is relevant, that's when they will do it. And they will do it at their office when you, both of you had an opportunity to confirm that both of you are you are legitimately interested in the job, and they are a legitimate employer. If somebody requests, we won't review your application until you pay us, then you are being scammed. In which case, don't pay them. So I cannot stress this again. Do not give out your social security number, banking information, or any kind of financial information of any kind to a prospective employer over Craigslist. So I really don't want to scare you, but part of being, an informed individual in a complex information society is understanding when to share information and when not to share information. And Craigslist, err on the side of not sharing. A resume is fine. A name is fine. Email is fine. Phone is fine. But, these people don't need to know where you live. It's that simple. So because it's just the nature of an anonymous board where this happens a lot. Also, my personal rule of thumb is anyone who's, leading a post, so usually sales is a good candidate to find something that looks pretty scammy. So let's look at our list. Anyone where you do this, where it says all caps, is a scam, almost certainly. if somebody is, really like that gung-ho about all capping it, chances are you do not want to work for these people. So yeah, helpful safety tip there. Okay, close that out. So this is the last thing I wanted to include. I recognize people use this to find jobs. I've done it before. I'll probably do it again at some point. But follow these helpful safety tips and you can have like a positive information experience in what is kind of a, open air information market. And it's just important to be safe. So this is about the end of our presentation. I really want to thank you for taking the time to sit through and listen to my talk. Again, all of this information is going to be coming online in the form of a LibGuide that should be under sort of the term student workshop, and then it'll probably be some title of researching companies and company information. So it will have all of the content you've seen here, as well as probably some additional stuff I find will be posted to that LibGuide, and hopefully it should be available in the next anywhere between 2 and 3 weeks. So with that, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this, as it's been a great pleasure to do this internship at CWU, and this particular workshop has been a lot of fun to research and teach. So with that, this is Neil Parker, signing off.